Hey, hello, what's up, and welcome into this week's episode of the Geek Garage podcast. I am Ted, joined as always by the genius guy who created this show, Mr. David. How are you?
I am great, and thank you for calling me genius, guy. I feel like it's pretty fitting and accurate. I am a genius.
It was very tongue-in-cheek, but so it goes. Yes, this week's episode finds us covering and exploring the realm of ghosts, spirits, hauntings, and all of that kind of fun and crazy shit in part 2 of our ongoing Informal Paranormal series. David, we got a lot of feedback about this one.
Yeah, lots.
Like
We
a stupid amount, almost.
it was a stupid amount. That's the best way to put it, I feel like. I sent out a message on Facebook saying like, "Hey, if you have ghost stories, please let me know." And for like the next 3 or 4 hours, I was like hopping back and forth between 15 different people, like just giving me the most elaborate ghost stories I've ever heard in my entire life. And it cut to me like having to binge watch a season of The Office just so I could get to sleep that night.
Yeah, it's weird that so many people have experiences with ghosts because they're not real. But we'll get to that. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, we already know we're like a minute into the podcast and we already know Ted's position.
I have
But
already alienated a very solid and sizable percentage of our listeners.
everyone's like, "It's okay, Ted. You're entitled to your wrong opinion."
Yeah, well,
So it goes.
yeah, so it goes. Yeah, but I think we got more feedback on this episode, or more. I think there was more of a dialogue with listeners based
For
on this
sure.
episode
Mhm.
than maybe all of our other episodes combined, which is a little disheartening. And also, maybe it's time to pivot into what every other podcast is about, which is paranormal and true crime.
Yeah, let's dive deeper into the already saturated podcast market into a oversaturated podcast niche.
Yeah.
Yeah, that nothing could go wrong.
Well, let's not get too crazy. But yeah. Uh,
No,
all jokes aside, we do thank everyone for the support, and particularly for the support for this episode and for our Informal Paranormal series in general. This is only the second episode we've done of it so far, but everything that we've posted about it, and by we I mean David, has posted about it, has gotten a lot of positive attention,
mhm.
and it seems like a lot of people are interested in those topics. Which, again, there are like 3 million podcasts you could be listening to about that. I do not understand, but I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth, as the old saying goes.
Yeah. No, I mean you're right. We did get a lot of yeah, feedback's kind of a funny word considering the episode hasn't come out yet, but like, you know, inquisitions, I guess, and just
Nobody expects that.
uh, just genuine sparked interest in the fact that we're exploring these other things. Like, it came as a surprise to, I think, both of us when we went to GalaxyCon and we heard about how much people liked the fact that we don't talk about just comic books or just video games like or cosplay. Like we talk about everything that kind of has like a fandom or some sort of geeky following of some sort. And and so it was, I think it just furthered that appreciation from our, all 7 of our listeners, that they appreciate a podcast that's willing to, do episodes on comic books and cosplay and technology and ghosts, you know, and
Yes, which is fitting because, like comic books, ghosts are not real. I'm going to say that as many times as I can squeeze it in. I want you to hate me. I am nourished by your hatred.
I am nourished by your hatred.
Uh, yeah. Like with our first Informal Paranormal episode, we're only going to be scratching the surface on the topic of ghosts, which again, fake. So please forgive us when we inevitably leave things out. This is not meant to be a lecture series or, an academic exercise. This is just 2 idiots talking about shit on a podcast. So, if we don't mention your fave, Ghosty, Post Malone. I don't know where I'm going with that. If
Did
we
you
don't mention,
just say Ghost Malone? What if Ghost could get tattoos?
that would be lit.
Uh, like just imagine like Casper in the fucking chair, just strapped up. He's getting like a an arm full of like death metal font
Casper, the
tattoos.
friendly reply guy.
Friendly reply guy.
Okay. Now that we've scratched the surface of that, yeah. So we're probably going to leave some things out. It's not intentional. It's never intentional, and unless it is, in which case you'll never know the difference. We do plan on talking about a few different things, such as some of the more popular or famous ghost stories. Some of our personal thoughts on the topic, which I feel like mine are very clear so far. David, I'm sure, will get his words in edgewise,
Mhm.
and then if we have time, we may have some listener stories. We'll see how the time goes. We will also cover what ghosts and spirits really are in lore and urban legends, going beyond what is represented in most popular media like movies, TVs, and books. And then we will attempt to respectfully discuss ghosts and spirits in a couple of different cultures and religions. Notice I said try, so
Yes.
go ahead and get them Twitter pitchforks ready. David, I think that's it. Do you have anything else before we get started?
No. I say let's jump into this shit.
All right, well, hit that music and let's get this shit show on the road.
All right. Boop.
All right, so David, you did a little bit of research here. We both did, mostly you. I did nothing. I contribute nothing except bad jokes, but again, neither here nor there. You did a little research, and tell us what you found about ghosts in various cultures.
So, upon my extensive research, not so much really. I did about 20 to 30 minutes of searching on the interwebs, and I don't know why I was expecting something very similar to our first Informal Paranormal episode where we covered demonic possessions and exorcisms, where it was basically a handful of cultures and religions and whatnot that observe said topic. I don't know why, but I was kind of expecting something similar to that. Lo and behold, it would be much easier to tell you the cultures and the peoples around the world that don't believe in ghosts because it's quite minimal.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't ghosts. An argument could be made that it's a little reductive, but ghosts, spirits, hauntings. There's 1,000 synonyms for the generic term ghosts, but they are observed in some form or fashion in pretty much any and every part of the world, every corner of this earth. They are observed in some way.
Yeah, it's basically like a human universal,
Yeah.
or very close to that, where you know basically every people's or culture has some belief in the afterlife or spirits or spirit worship or something to do something to that effect. Not all of them are the same. In fact, there's a lot of variance, and to me that's really interesting in that it can be something so specific and yet
Hmm.
have so much difference, from culture to culture, from people to people, even from person to person within a specific culture.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. Neither one of us are anthropologists or sociologists or anything to that effect, so we're not going to get too deep into that. But
Right.
it is really interesting, and to me it shows like, I'm going to get all hippie for a minute here, but we basically, most of us all want the same things out of life, and we need to understand that we're a lot more alike than we are different
For sure.
as humans. as we all float along this cosmic ball in the middle of a vast emptiness of space with no purpose.
Right, just harpooning ourselves into the blackest of black that there ever was.
Yes, we're
Um,
becoming more goth by the day.
exactly. Earth is basically on its way to the cosmic hot topic.
We're all piled into our mom's minivan, um, on the way to a uh, a teenage cover band of Susie and the Banshees. So,
Speaking of hot topic, and getting like dropped off at the mall and shit. Ted, did I ever tell you about that time where like back when Hot Topic used to like be that really creepy place that like the older ladies like hexed as they walked by?
yeah,
Um, I actually bought a book of spells. Did I tell you that?
no, because I would have remembered judging you harshly if you had.
I mean, fair, but yeah, so I mean, this was back when like Hot Topic sold that kind of stuff. When you went in there, and that's the kind of stuff that you were expecting to see. Like they still sold like your typical clothing merchandise and whatnot, but they also sold like really weird eclectic stuff that you sometimes find at like Earthbound and stuff. And yeah, I found a book of spells, and I bought it. And my parents were none too pleased.
No, I'm sure not. Um,
I Yeah, I grew up in a very, very strict Catholic household. So yeah, my dad and especially my mom, for whatever reason, she was like, "Yeah, if I was with you, I would not have allowed you to buy this." I'm like, "Damn!" Like, I didn't even really believe in it that much at the time. I just thought it was a neat book. I was like, "What if we could summon the devil and shit?"
I too listen to Slayer. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know. I think we both thought just to get back on track here. I think we both thought it was really interesting that basically every culture had some belief in it. So
For sure.
that's really
Uh,
interesting.
you Ted, you have, and promise I'm trying not to stereotype you. I Do you have some knowledge about the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertes? Because I know that is a um, big to do in the Spanish and Hispanic community. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it is basically a celebration of the dead and spirits and whatnot. Am I correct?
Uh, Broad strokes. So I
Okay,
was raised by white people, so my
sure.
knowledge of of any of that is you know pretty pretty much what everybody else learned on that one day in school
We
where
learned
we
about
learned that there was a world outside of Honky Town.
it. Yeah, they were very generous on that day. They're
Yeah,
like, "Y'all are getting a treat today, kids."
yeah, yeah. But I mean, it's a celebration of you know of uh, of ancestors isn't really the right word, because I think when you say ancestors, a lot of people assume like distant past.
Right.
But you sort of like your forebears, your
Sure.
great grandparents, great grandparents, things like that. So, and other family members that may sadly have passed. But
Yeah,
um,
like family members that you would have personally got to meet and know in the flesh, as it were.
yeah,
Yeah.
what it is not is you know, it's not Mexican Halloween.
Very much so. Is that offensive? If someone were to ask, like, "Hey, is that Mexican Halloween?" or just say it ignorantly?
I think, I mean, to me, I don't speak for everybody, right? I can only speak for myself. To me, it's only offensive if it's meant to offend. So
Sure.
if you're coming at me like the question you asked to somebody else, that may have been offensive. Like, how do you not know that? But to me, I'm just like, why would David know that?
Hmm.
Why would the average person in Nashville know that if they're not, Hispanic or Latino?
Right.
Um, so like I said, speaking only for myself, it only causes offense if it's meant to, in
Yeah.
my opinion. There's a difference between being ignorant and true ignorance,
Sure.
So, but yeah, like I said, in broad strokes, it's just a festival where people get together and remember and celebrate friends and family that have passed on. Um,
Hmm.
it's there is a lot of pageantry and a lot of, I don't know if costumes is really the right word, but like dressing up in ways that you wouldn't like normally
Right.
clothe yourself. So like I said, a lot of pageantry, a lot of um, things like that. But it's not the same as like Halloween where you dress up because spooky scary or whatever. There's a purpose behind it beyond that. But
Right.
it's kind of a complicated holiday, and I don't really want to get too deep into it. And then somebody
Sure.
who's like, I guess more Mexican than me would be like, no.
Yeah. No, and since we did say that we didn't really have a lot to talk about it as ghosts pertain to different religions and cultures in the world, we definitely don't want to spend a ton of time talking about this in particular, but it was a question that I was kind of saving for the podcast because I figured it'd make for somewhat, decent conversation for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I hope you feel enlightened by that.
I do actually. I learned something today. Um, but yeah. So so Ted, it very much sounds like you are on the non-believer approaching this topic from a practical standpoint kind of guy.
Yeah. Like I've said previously, I always wanted to be a Mulder, but I'm very much a Scully. To tie it
Mm,
into like a geek reference, like
right.
I've just never been able to buy ghosts or I said this about the demons episode. Like I don't believe in that either.
Mhm.
So I guess in a way I'm kind of a square, but there's just never nothing has ever jumped out at me and been like, this is real. And something that really always solidified that to me is that people say, oh, well, if you're not open to it, then they're not going to present themselves to you, which is that's dumb. I should be the person they want to show up to and be like, motherfucker, shut up.
Yeah. So after talking to all these people online or either digitally or the couple of conversations that I had with some friends that will be released after this episode, um, that's definitely not the impression that I get, or the opinion that those kinds of people have that really believe in ghosts and spirits and an afterlife and hauntings, etc., is that they don't necessarily criticize and hold it against those that decide to not believe, or just they're like, you can't prove it. So uh, it's more of a, I'm trying to figure out a way to put this in a way that it doesn't sound like I'm putting words in their mouth or generalizing. Um, it's just, it was a little different than what I was expecting from those that believe. Like, just, I guess, broad strokes, they don't criticize non-believers the way that I initially thought, because I go into this with an open mind personally. I think I side with Mulder in terms of, like, I want to believe, kind of, sort of.
Hmm.
Um, I definitely believe in ghosts more than our previous topic with the demonic possessions and exorcisms. Like, I mean, obviously, exorcisms are quote unquote real because they have been performed. Whether or not they are actually effective and they're doing anything is, yeah, that's a topic that, yeah, for another day. And so, yeah, I definitely believe, or I'm inclined to believe some ghost stories, just because, like, I feel like almost everyone on Earth has had some sort of experience that they cannot explain. Some sort of paranormal uh, event that happens, and I think some people, including me, find it a little fun to stretch your imagination and be like, what, you know, let's have some fun with the fact that we can't really explain what this was. So I think, there's that aspect of the belief structure in ghosts and spirits, and then there's the there's the people that kind of sway farther in that direction, deeper down the rabbit hole, where they're almost like, I wish I could choose to not believe, but my life has felt so fucking haunted. And I've definitely talked to a few of those people over the last couple of days.
Yeah. I mean, I'm of the opinion that just because we can't explain something doesn't mean we'll never be able to. And,
Sure.
I think that there's probably a rational explanation for a lot of so called ghost and spiritual, or, well, spiritual in the non religious sense, I guess,
Hmm.
um, uh, episodes, so to speak. But, you know,
Yeah.
who am
Yeah,
I
we
to deny somebody's lived experience?
right.
So, despite my non-belief or disbelief, lack of belief, there are a lot of famous or infamous stories about ghosts. David, let's talk about some of those.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot. And like Ted said in the beginning, it would be an impossible task to take on them all. In fact, we would have to, like he said, have our own, just morph the podcast into only paranormal shit and ghost shit.
We're pivoting to paranormal,
Yeah, that's what we're going to call the podcast, formerly known as Geek Garage Podcast.
a YouTube
Pivoting.
experience.
Where we eat cereal at the same time.
Yes.
Delicious. But yeah, we definitely won't be covering every single witch, or every single witch shit, every single ghost, but we are gonna kind of hit the highlights and some of the details with a few of them. And we're actually doing, like, it's not just ghosts but like hauntings as well, and other things that kind of fall under the big umbrella of ghosts and hauntings and whatnot. So, yeah, Ted, you want to start getting into some of these?
Sure. The first one, I'm going to go on the record now and say that I think it's flimsy to call this one a ghost, but you included it, so we'll cover it briefly at least, and that is the Mothman.
Yeah, I like I said, we were talking about this a little bit off air, and then we wanted to save this conversation for the actual podcast. I was approached by a couple people when I did ask for popular ghost stories. I'm not super well read on the topic, so I wanted some quote unquote expert opinions, or I know, knowing that we have a lot of listeners that choose to believe and or at least find this kind of stuff fascinating. They reached out to me with a lot of information, and one of the common denominators was Mothman. And you had the interesting point that it borders more on the cryptozoology side of things.
Arguably, yeah.
Yeah. Um, like I said, a couple people did bring up Mothman when I asked for, um, a popular ghost stories or urban legends. So I figured it warranted being on this list.
Yeah. I mean, that's all good, but no, we're gonna skip this one and talk about it on a later episode of this series. So
Yeah.
we'll put a pin in that, all you Mothman fans, because I like the Mothman mythos, as it were.
Yeah, it's
But
very,
time and a place for everything, and this is neither.
for sure. Yeah. Um, but next up, this one, pretty much everyone, ghost fans and not, have heard of this one. The Bell Witch.
Woo woo! Tennessee represent.
Yeah. Apparently there's a lot of haunted shit in Tennessee. Did you
Yes,
know that?
it's good to be known for something other than horrific racism as a state.
Yes, in fact it is. Uh, we're known for a few things. The volunteer states, the nicest state in the union.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and we got a shit ton of ghosts too. So you better watch your back. You don't want a haunting coming for you. But yeah, the Bell Witch. So apparently it is from Robertson County. And a little bit of history about it. It occurred in the early 1800s, about from 1817, from like the initial sightings to about 1821, and it affected John Bell Sr. and his family. The basically the what do you call it, the Bible, I guess, for lack of better words, when it comes to the literature behind the Bell Witch, is a book written by a journalist named Martin V. Ingram, and it's called The Authenticated History of the Bell Witch. Uh, I
That's how you know it's real, because it's got the word authentic in it.
Yes, I mean, you can't just stick that in any book title and
Think people
expect.
would do that? Just write words that aren't true? No.
It was Abraham Lincoln himself that said everything on the internet is real.
Yes.
So yeah. um
I've
but
heard
yeah. Right, yeah, I mean, and it has to be true. I found it on Wikipedia.
that. And Honest Abe said it. So
Yes,
honest is right there in the name.
right, exactly. I mean, you can't just go around calling yourself honest and tell fucking lies all day. I
Yeah,
mean,
that would be a
that's not
dick
how
move.
this works. Yeah, that would be a dick move. What if he really was a vampire hunter? That would be dope as fuck. Like, that would make me love Abraham Lincoln even more.
Ended slavery, killed vampires. That's a pretty
Right.
solid resume.
I mean, like 10 out of 10 would recommend I'd hire that dude.
Yeah.
So things started getting real weird around the Bell household when they started seeing just random apparitions outside. The daughter started seeing, weird figures swinging from trees, and they experienced this for a while until the strangeness made its way indoors, where they started hearing like scratching on walls and like chains on the floor and random fighting dogs. It got real weird, real quick, apparently. um, John Bell apparently began to have some mouth paralysis, and apparently the intensity inside reached a point where like sheets were being pulled off of their beds, and like the kids had unexplained physical harm like while they were sleeping and at night. Um, so crazy shit like that. Is it crazy? Kinda. I feel like if you wanted to, especially with this being in the early 1800s, you could pick a handful of reasons just off the top of your head to explain all these. Um, we're not really here to shit on anyone's parade, so to speak, for if you do choose to believe in the events of the Bell Witch. But yeah, Ted, what do you think?
Um, I don't know, man. It's hard to sort of remove myself from this because, growing up, Robertson County, and this is not that far away
Right.
from where I grew up, where, kind of the area we live in now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of hard to remove myself from it, because it's a story that I grew up hearing. You know, people lie about shit all the time. You know,
Mm-hmm. Right.
it could be that this family just all had a communal bad acid trip. That is my official stance.
Yeah, I feel like growing up, they were a little more liberal with the mushrooms they found in the forest, right? Like,
Right.
like the dad and the son that's like 5 years old, they go walking in the forest to pick berries and shit, and the son's like, "Ooh, mushrooms!" And not having one of those fancy machines that tells you the levels of psilocybin in it. They were just like, "Yeah, that should be fine to eat."
Yeah, it turns out they're just a family of lightweights. So Joe Rogan is not impressed, bros.
Good pull there. Um, but yeah, so that's the Bell Witch. Not comprehensively, of course. Like we said, that's not what you're going to get here. But in a nutshell, some so-called weird shit went down. Who knows if it was actually weird shit? Like Ted said, it could have been. It's just a bad trip, where they started seeing shit, which tends to happen on trips.
Yeah, well, the reason I bring that up is because some historians think that's what happened in Salem.
Right. Yes.
Is it the bread got it's a specific type of mold, and now I can't think of the name of it,
Oh yeah. It's like,
but it basically presents with similar sort of symptoms as like a bad trip.
right. Yeah. And honestly, like, I find that fascinating. Like, yes, it is fucking terrible that a lot of people had to die in the Salem witch trials, for basically absolutely nothing. But yeah, that it is kind of fascinating to me, like the science side of me that does every once in a while like to prove something like that. Just to have that as the conclusion is kind of mentally satisfying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there have been a couple of instances that historians think have basically been attributed to the like bad food preparation techniques where mold was ingested that had similar properties, but neither here nor there.
Right.
The Lady in White is another big legend. There's actually several different quote unquote white ladies
Hmm.
historically, but a lot of them, well, basically all of them, have the same kind of story or background, and that is they're essentially like related to tragedy, a tragedy of some kind.
Right.
Brazil has a popular legend about a lady in white who died during childbirth. So she appears and is sad, basically.
Right.
um, some of them are pretty harmless, other than they would just be scary, I would assume. But they're not like some other poltergeist, like the Bell Witch, for example, that want to fuck your day up.
Right. Yeah. So I told you that I did have one single ghost experience, and the only thing that in my research that I found that I could contribute to my personal experience is the Lady in White, um, or it was just straight up the ghost of one of Andrew Jackson's slaves. Like, that's kind of what I think happened. I mean, the short version is that I was driving home from Starbucks one night. I was working a part time job there. It was typically nights and weekends, and so I was driving home one night. It was late, and at the time I was living in Hermitage, and we lived, like a stone's throw from the actual Hermitage, Andrew Jackson's house. And so I was about to pass. I was maybe a quarter mile down the road, and I see this lady in white, um, walking on my side of the road, and I thought, like, it was kind of odd. It was a very stark contrast. She was African American, this very elaborate kind of gown. I couldn't figure out if it was like a wedding gown or like a old timey like sleep, um like nightgown, I guess. But yeah, it was very weird. Nothing like I've ever seen before. And you remember that scene from Kill Bill 2 where she climbs out of the grave and she's crossing the road to that diner, and the dude's like in there like about to take a sip of coffee or whatever, and he sees her like crossing the street, and she's got like dirt like trailing behind her.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what it looked like, but it wasn't dirt. It was just like this puffy white cloud that was like surrounding her. It was crazy. And what I was hoping would happen was I would get real close, be like, oh yeah, like she just like looks like someone that lived around there, because there was other, there was a few subdivisions, including mine, in that area. And but no, like the closer I got, I was like, this shit looks real weird. And there was just like this drop in my stomach for whatever reason. Like, I had never felt that like level of fear and terror before. Um, you know, like I said, it could have been nothing. It could have been a ghost. Um, it's the only
Could have been
experience
a
I've ever
crackhead.
had. It could have been. But yeah, so and it could have been a lady in white to circle back around. But yeah, next up, coming away from like ghost individuals or figures, moving more towards like hauntings. Um, Ted, what do you know about Alcatraz?
Well,
Other than the fact that it was a prison.
it was a prison.
Mhm.
Um, I don't believe in ghosts, but the
No,
only
you don't
thing,
say.
huh?
You don't say.
Yeah, that may have come up a couple of times. The only time I've ever had what you could consider a ghostly experience was at Alcatraz.
Okay.
Um, I was on one of the tours, and they talk about Alcatraz being haunted because tourists eat that kind of shit up.
Hmm.
And anytime that there's a place that has a history like Alcatraz, people are quick to throw the restless spirits angle on there, so they
Hmm.
can milk that. Anyway, at one point on the tour, they let you go into one of these solitary confinement holding cells.
Hmm.
It was me and my uncle with a group of other people. My back was against the wall. I was back in a corner, so my right shoulder was basically in the corner and my back was against the wall. Okay, so I had a wall on my right side and at my back. There was
Okay.
nobody could have been behind me. There was nobody within arm's reach of me on my left.
Okay.
Cell was probably 10 by 6, something like that. So we fit a few people in there, and there was still some room, that you could maneuver around. But if you took a step or two, you would have bumped into somebody else. But like I said, I remember there was nobody close, nobody within arm's reach of me to my left. When they shut the door, it's pitch black,
Hmm.
and I felt something touch my back. Now, there's a very good chance that it was somebody fucking with me,
Sure.
which is what I've always believed. But I tell that story because it endears me to people who believe in ghosts, and they think, oh, he's just a rapscallion telling all these crazy jokes. Uh, but I don't know. Alcatraz is always really interesting to me, and I don't want to turn this into the TED talks about Alcatraz hour.
Right.
But I will say that it's supposedly very, very haunted, and probably for very good reason.
Yeah. Now I was doing a bit of research on Alcatraz because I'm not necessarily from the San Francisco area, but I was born like less than an hour north of San Francisco, so it's kind of near and dear to my heart, anyways. So it's kind of a crime against humanity that I did not know as really anything about Alcatraz. So I did a little bit of a deep dive, and it turns out like it's widely inaccurately depicted in movies. Like uh, apparently, it was not as bad as like it's made out to be. It's not like Satan's lair where you go and like just fireballs are shoved up your ass all day long. It's not really like that. It's um, people like got to do things if they had good behavior, and that from the people that did hard time at like really bad places, it had actually had a reputation of being pretty fair, like to its inmates, which I found pretty interesting. So the fact that you know aside from the fact that it's surrounded by water and escaping is practically impossible. Is fun to learn a little bit about it. So I definitely encourage you to even just like the Alcatraz like website where you can go and look up little factoids, and I think it has like the tour information and stuff on there too. So definitely recommend that. It's a fun read.
Yeah, it's a really interesting place. Um, Even like ghosts and paranormal stuff aside, just the history of it, I think, is fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right, so we have basically one more haunting that we got to get through, and then we are going to dive into a ghost story from one of our write-ins from our one of our listeners. Aren't you excited about that, Ted? I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm not gonna spoil who it's from just yet, but I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
Despite my inherent negativity, basically, about this whole subject. But speaking of the last haunting you picked a doozy for the
Yeah.
last one.
Yeah, it's so this was actually a kind of a hotel or haunting, etc. thing that we both were kind of cognizant of or aware of, like it in terms of it existing, but we didn't know that it was like this particular hotel. We just had heard stories surrounding things that went down at this hotel. Um,
Yeah,
and then I looked into it because someone had brought it up, and I was like, oh shit, well, that's where this thing went down. And I asked you if you had heard of it, and you were like, oh yeah, isn't that the thing where the girl did such and such? And so yeah, we found a couple articles that had that were pretty detailed. And yeah, like this hotel is haunted AF. Like it's basically the devil's lair.
right.
Just if you ever are in Los Angeles, just stay somewhere else. Like find a
Keep on trucking down the street. Don't
yeah,
stay there.
yeah, find a friend, or go to any of the other billion hotels I'm sure that are available there, unless you just enjoy staying at haunted places, and then in that case go for
Yeah, I mean, if you want to recreate living Las or leaving Las Vegas and then do it in
it.
Los Angeles instead, I guess you could do worse than the murder
Right,
hotel.
right. So the hotel that we are referring to is none other than the Cecil Hotel. Cecil or Cecil? We're going to go with Cecil, so we don't have to say Cecil or Cecil every fucking time.
Yeah, also because it sort of rhymes with evil, so I feel like that's fitting.
Sure, yeah. So if we are mispronouncing it, we apologize.
No, we don't.
You can
Don't lie to these people.
actually us on the social media interwebs if you want. I'm not going to care because I have better things to do with my life. But anyways, so yeah, it is the Cecil Hotel. And like we said, it's basically the most haunted fucking place of all time. It was built in 1924. It was kind of built to uh, have all these rich, wealthy people come and stay at it. But then the Great Depression hit. And all of a sudden, Skid Row became a thing, which is like right around the corner. And we all know, that Skid Row is known for its classy folks, right?
Yeah, and a
Uh,
couple of banger tracks, but that's
right. That's a different Skid Row,
yeah.
though, right?
Oh, sorry.
We're talking about ones with like heroin needles and, well, I
Yeah,
don't
well,
know.
I mean,
Yes, so the band. Anyways, so basically shit started going down in 1931 where it experienced its first suicide. Someone's body was discovered in a pile of poison capsules. So yeah, what a great way to kick things off. Then only a few years later, 1937, a 25-year-old became the fourth person to die at the hotel, and um, she fell from the ninth story, apparently her body was tangled in telephone wires. So, I mean, that's a way to go, I suppose.
a shitty one. Yeah.
Yeah,
That sucks.
I mean, like so I'm assuming it's like, because this is back in the day where you had a telephone and it was in fact connected to the wall by a long ass wire, because that's how phones worked. And so I'm just imagining like a 50-foot telephone cord. Uh, I mean, I guess that's the situation. I bet like the new heads that listen to our podcast are like, I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about.
Well, David, I think that they mean like the telephone wires from poles.
You think so?
Yeah, I'm pretty. Yeah,
That's even more fucked up.
yeah, that sucks even harder.
Cause like you have to go looking for that shit. Like how I
Well, I
mean,
feel like if you fall 9 stories, you don't have to really look for much. It just sort of finds you.
Oh, so you think her body fell out and like fell through some telephone wires and she
Yes.
got tangled up in it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that would make much sense. I guess my just overly elaborate, make things super complicated kind of brain was like, yeah, someone busted in there, strangled her, and then wrapped her up in telephone wires. And I don't know. I guess it's just I've spent way too much of this month reading true crime stuff, watching true crime stuff, watching horror.
We're
So,
pivoting to true crime. We already talked about that. Now, the way you were describing it, it made it sound like a yakety sax kind of moment where like she trips over a telephone wire and then falls out the window or something, and it gets tangled up in it on the way down. Which there's nothing funny about a young woman dying.
no,
That would be kind of amusing though if that were the case of her death.
I mean, a little.
It's okay. She's dead. What you gonna do?
Yeah, yeah. We'll move on from that one. So, fast forward a few years later, 1944, when a young woman gave birth in one of the hotel rooms, and she, for whatever reason, threw her newborn out of the window in a panic.
She was
I
testing your theory about telephone wires.
must have been.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what kind of panic this was. Uh, maybe panic that she had a baby. Is like, how am I supposed to deal with this yeeted into the sun? Um, I mean, I can't personally relate to that feeling, but you know, some people just aren't ready for parenthood, I guess.
And apparently.
But yeah, just a few years later, 1947. This is so from what I read, this is allegedly an alleged case. It's not necessarily confirmed as fact, but allegedly Elizabeth Short, who, if you don't know, she was known as the Black Dahlia, was spotted having a drink at the hotel. I'm assuming the hotel bar, days before her murder. So, her murder was not at the hotel, but yeah, I don't know. Ted, do you know much about the Black Dahlia? I
Y-
really don't know a whole lot about it.
yeah. So, as we continue our pivot into true crime,
Right.
the Black Dahlia was a young woman who was brutally murdered and eviscerated, in fact, and then left and posed um, in a really gruesome crime that really kind of caught the public attention and has sort of endured over the last 80 some odd years or close to it. Technically unsolved, I think. But
Mhm.
of course, the methods that were used back in the mid 40s, not what they are today. So a lot of
Right.
things like DNA and all that didn't exist. There have been a lot of speculation, or there has been a lot of speculation, I should say, about who the killer was or killers were. Several people have come forward and said that it was this person definitively, but again, I don't think it's ever been officially solved. I do know that I read a book on it by a man who insisted that his father had been the Black Dahlia killer. His
Mm.
name was Hodel, I believe, George Hodel, or maybe his father's name was George Hodel. And that was big news. Most of my family's from California, the same as yours.
Sure.
Mine being from Southern California, particularly. So, they kind of followed that because they all lived there during that time, and it was
Okay.
shocking.
Sure.
Um,
Wasn't there a band, or there is a band called the Black Dahlia Murder?
yes, they're
Okay.
they're they're dope. I enjoy them a lot. There have been several movies about the Black Dahlia,
Okay.
including the film Black Dahlia with Josh Hartnett and Scarlett Johansson, I think, is in
Yeah,
that.
that was like a 2000s flick, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
that came out about 15 years ago. I want to say that was Brian De Palma.
Was it?
I think so.
Damn, I need to check that shit out.
I don't think it was a very well received movie,
No.
um, but that's kind of so it goes like that.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, that was a pretty big case, and still, I think technically is a big case because, like I said, I don't know that it's ever officially been closed.
Fast forward several years, to 1984, we have a one Richard Ramirez. He was actually known as the Night Stalker. I apologize. We're gonna dip ever so slightly back into true crime, but I promise we're gonna reel it back in.
Telling you,
Uh,
that's the pivot.
yeah, yeah, maybe fuck it, we should just do it. Do the serial thing. um, that joke lands for like the 3 people that get it. Well,
Does it?
anyway. No, I mean it landed with me and the 2 people in my head. So, anyways, uh, so yes, this Ramirez went on a killing spree, basically working his way from Orange County to San Francisco. And while he was in LA, this hotel was the base of his operations, the Cecil Hotel. And he even disposed of evidence using the hotel's dumpster. So, quite resourceful.
At this point, the hotel's got to close, right? And we're only like, this is only through what, the 70s? Like, goddamn, bro.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's only been open basically for, a few decades. And and like the ones that we've listed so far, those are basically the highlights. Like, we're not hitting on every single one, unfortunately. There's, after this, when I get a little bit more time, I really want to do a deeper dive into this hotel and figure out exactly everything that went down, because that would appease my sick brain. But anyways, so jumping forward a tiny bit to, well, kind of jumping forward, but also jumping back. In the 70s, a Austrian, sorry, not Australian, Austrian serial killer named Jack Unterweger. He was doing some prison time, and long story short, he wrote a memoir that uh, uh, I guess a lot of people ended up reading. And it was a memoir about his life, and I guess about the crimes that he had committed, and society and the powers that be and police and just the whole nine. They all took it as like a sign of how the prison, quote unquote, reform system is actually working. And turns out that he basically tricked everyone. Like, he just wrote a bunch of bullshit to in an attempt to trick everyone into thinking that he was reformed, when in fact he was crazier than ever, because he got out, and he was able to get a job um, as a reporter and as a journalist. And what he typically covered was murders of sex workers, and prostitutes, which is quite coincidental because that was one of the main things that he was known for. So things started to kind of come to a head again for him when 3 sex workers were attacked and killed, in a way that mirrored his previous crimes and most recent crimes that were, of course, not discovered yet and are connected to him, at least. And the police were basically they were eventually able to tie those murders to him. So yeah, basically the connection between him and the hotel was that during a lot of these murders of these sex workers, they happened while he was like staying at the hotel in one of the rooms and just doing his investigating, quote unquote. Really, it was just, killing folks. So that's cool. But not really. We don't condone murder.
Well, no, you're right. We don't. We don't.
Yeah, that is accurate. So right around 2011, the proprietors of the Cecil Hotel, they were like, you know what? Maybe we should like rebrand.
A lot of bad vibes with this name here currently.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad juju going on in this piece. So let us slap a new name on it, give it a new coat of paint. I'm assuming both figuratively and physically. And they rebranded as Stay on Main. But that did not prevent bad shit from happening, unfortunately. I am not sure of if there's been several more instances since then, but the most noteworthy after the rebranding, and probably one of the most noteworthy period, is the case of Elisa Lamb. So, a lot of people, especially within the true crime and paranormal communities, they know about this specific instance because out of all the terrible, crazy shit that's happened at this hotel, this is the one we have like the most quote unquote evidence on, or it's the most contemporary, so we have a lot of materials on it. It happened back in 2013. This Elisa Lamb, if you may have seen the notorious YouTube video of her on the elevator, like getting on and off the elevator, pushing buttons, uh, poking her head out of the elevator or around the corner, acting like she's looking for someone. This is all unsolved, basically. Like, no one knows, exactly why she was doing this, why she was getting on and off the elevator, looking around to see what was, maybe she was being followed, pushing all these elevator buttons. It's it's a pretty damn big mystery, honestly, and it basically culminated or climaxed with I think some residents of the hotel were complaining about water pressure in their showers and I guess their tubs and sinks. So the maintenance worker goes to check and he finds Lamb's body floating there. A lot of the mystery stems from how not only about what was going on in the elevator, but her and how she wound up in the tank, because it was on the roof of the hotel, which means that she would have needed some sort of way to get up there and outside, meaning she would need a key of some sort, unless just somehow miraculously she was able to jimmy her way out and onto the roof. But then there's still the issue of getting inside, and she's, if you look at the or watch the YouTube video, she's not a big person. She's pretty tiny. Looks like she's shorter than I am. So, you know, it's, you I definitely suggest, if you haven't looked into this a whole lot, to go look up more of the details on your end, because it would do it better justice than me trying to regurgitate everything in the most accurate detail. But yeah, it's some crazy shit. uh, I got nothing when it comes to this one.
Yeah. I remember hearing about this online. With true crime is basically like a cottage industry at this point. And a lot of people try and flex their somewhat applicable reasoning powers, trying to figure out and
Sure.
solve some of these cases, which, you'll never hear me say a good word about any police ever, but if they haven't figured it out with all of their technology and training, then random guy on the internet at number 12, there's no hope for you, bro. There's just not. But that said, I do remember this case, and I feel like it was, I don't know if it was officially considered solved or closed, but I feel like it was decided that she had um, like a potentially undiagnosed mental disorder, and
Yeah,
that it
yeah,
was it was accidental. Her death was accidental because she crawled in and then accidentally locked herself in.
yeah. The couple of resources that I found on the interwebs, they said that she had either diagnosed or undiagnosed bipolar disorder. I'm pretty sure it was diagnosed, but whether or not she was medicated or not, I am not sure. So that definitely throws a red flag of some sort as to the possibility of like you said, Ted, an accidental drowning, maybe. I mean, if you're bipolar and you are juggling going on and off your meds intermittently like that, it it really fucks with your brain. And I mean, I know, I've lost a friend or two, or casual acquaintance, to suicide because of the needing to be on meds and not being on meds, or hopping on and off meds. It's a nasty business. So that's definitely one potential possibility that happens. But yeah, it's Ted, like you said, it's I'm not sure if they ever really reached a conclusion, or they consider it case closed. It was accidental drowning or what. But yeah, it regardless, it's still some creepy shit. um, and I think there's even been talks about that YouTube footage being edited in some form or fashion, and not just like cut down for time's sake, like it was
Right.
20 minutes, and they're like, oh well, there's just like 10 minutes of her standing there. I believe from what I've read, it was like, yeah, if it was edited, it was to cut something out that you like, they quote unquote don't want you to see, something like that. But that's also hearsay.
It always kills me, like, and I think we have conspiracy theories on a different Informal Paranormal episode, but I'll go and throw this out there. Like, have you ever tried keeping a secret, David?
I have actually.
And it's not very easy, is it?
No, not in the
So
least.
my whole thing with conspiracy theories is like you're gonna get multiple people, sometimes hundreds or thousands of people, to keep their yaps shut about this. Nobody's telling anybody. They're not telling their buddies. They're not telling their wives or husbands or anything. Like, no, shut the fuck up. That's not how people work.
Right. Yeah, it's a weird one. um but yeah, that's about it that we got for the Cecil Hotel. um
Stay at a fucking Holiday Inn is basically the moral of the story for that.
yes, stay at the Holiday Inn.
The hotel,
uh,
motel, Holiday Inn.
yes, that is exactly that's what you should take away from this podcast,
Yes,
actually, is stay at the Holiday Inn.
they don't pay us, but maybe
No.
one day.
I mean, that would be kind of dope as fuck. Like, it would be a weird sponsor to take on for us. Like, all podcasts do,
You've
like,
heard about the murder hotel.
yeah, if you're looking for a hotel where you're probably not going to get murdered at, go stay at the Holiday Inn Express.
Can't promise it, but good chance that it doesn't happen.
Right. Like, this hotel has a significantly smaller amount of murders, deaths, and suicides than the Cecil Hotel. Um, so yeah. Um, well, Ted, do you have any other thoughts about the topics that we've touched on thus far, the ghosts and hauntings, before we dive into our listener story?
No, I do not.
Okay, cool. So we actually have quite a bit of extra content that comes along with this episode. And we are going to give you a little bit of teaser content right now. Like I said, we did have our listeners, DM me with their ghost stories, and it's a lot. And we want to give everyone the opportunity to have their stories heard in some form or fashion, but to just read one after another on this one episode would be kind of a lot, especially paired with what we've talked about thus far. It'd just be so much longer than our average duration. So,
Yeah, and the last thing anybody wants is a longer episode from us.
right. So, what we're going to do, we're going to read a story from one of our, she's kind of sort of a patron. She was on the show with her husband Mac for the Star Trek episode, which was actually a lot of fun. I got schooled in the the land of the world of Star Trek. It was a good time. But yeah, so we are going to highlight her story in this little teaser bit, and then we are going to record the other stories. We're going to do readings of the listener write-ins, but they will be released as quote unquote bonus content. And if you would like to sign up for our Patreon, either the $2 or $5 a month, or you can even just make a small a small donation amount of $1, a one-time donation. You can have access to that content, which will be the other ghost stories from our listener write-ins, and the two one-on-one conversations that I had, one with my dear friend Megan Zimmerman and from my other friend Miranda, those will be released as well under the bonus content umbrella that you can get if you just want to throw us $1 or sign up to be our monthly patrons. So yeah, Ted, you want to would you like to do the honors, or how'd you like to do this?
I will do the honors.
Okay.
I will do the thing.
Okie dokie.
All right. As David said, this story comes to us, or I guess it's actually a couple of short stories come to us from a friend of the show, Tiffany Elder. She has good people. And while I think that there's probably a rational explanation for what you're about to hear, she thinks that it's ghosts. So, out of respect to her and for the fact that, like I said, she has good people,
And she took the time to.
and she did take the time to do this. I will take this as seriously as possible, and save all witty comments till the end.
Thank you, Ted.
I make no promises, but I intend to do that. All right. So, here's Tiffany's story. When I was a kid, we lived next to my grandparents, who still lived in the house that my mother had grown up in. My grandfather passed away, and my grandmother moved to North Carolina to live with my aunt, so we moved into their house. There were always little funny things happening. Lights would go on and off, TV changed channels, etc. We always joked about having a ghost, and my parents even went so far as to name him Clarence. It was just a funny family joke to blame things on. One night, I was in bed, and I heard someone walking around. Very distinctive and obvious footsteps from across the room above my bed in the attic. We weren't supposed to go up there alone, but I love to be up there, so I figured if one of my parents was up there getting something, I could go hang out with them. I headed up and the lights weren't on. I turned them on, and I didn't see anyone. Creepy. I went back down to the second level of the house, and then continued down to the first floor, and both of my parents were there watching television. I asked who had been in the attic, and told them that I'd heard someone walking around up there. My dad became a little freaked out and went up with a baseball bat because I was adamant that I heard footsteps. That's good parenting right there. Respect to her father.
Yes.
I'm doing a great job of holding all witty comments to the end. He looked in every room, but there was no one there. They told me it was either in my head or I was making it up. It could have been just old house noises. I would hear it sometimes, but anytime I went to look, no one was there. I was later told in a totally different context, not even taking this story into account, that my grandparents used to rent out the attic to a couple in the late 1970s. They were a Mexican couple, and one day they just disappeared. I guess no one questioned it, and everyone assumed that they had been here under false pretenses, and sometimes people in that position would just disappear without giving any notice. I've always wondered if something happened to them and they haunted my damn attic. That would be shitty, right? Like, you don't even know these people existed and they're haunting your house. Ain't that a bitch?
Right. Just be like, man, I don't even know you. This is my purse.
She doesn't even go here. They don't even live here. Anyway, that's not here.
Yeah. Yeah. Scary shit.
That is freaky.
Yeah, this is one of the several that I got to read like in the dark at like 9 or 10 at night as they just came flooding in my inbox. And I was like, well, time to shit my pants.
Tiffany writes that later on, I used to live in a really creepy house where I felt uncomfortable constantly. We had a super fucking creepy basement, her words, that we called the murder basement. That's probably fitting. It's probably fitting. I could not walk past the stairs that went up to the second floor without feeling like if I looked, someone was going to be standing at the top staring at me. I used to run past the things. They gave me the creeps so bad. Years later, long after moving out of that house, I found out that it used to be a fucking funeral home. Holy shit. My bedroom, the bedroom I had there was not even an original room. The downstairs was one big area, but had been turned into a bedroom, living room, and dining room with added walls. And my room was probably very close to where they used to have funerals. So, wow, fuck that house.
That's exactly what I said. I was like, I just texted back like your life and your houses have been haunted AF.
Yeah, fuck that.
Yeah, like I'm Audi 5000.
Yeah.
That's basically like if 6 Feet Under wasn't about like how terrible it is to run a funeral home. It would be how terrible it is to run a funeral home because your house is fucking haunted with all the dead people that have come through it.
Yeah. How unfortunate. That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, for writing in with your stories and sharing your stories. We do appreciate it, and we apologize for your crazy childhood and your upbringing where you had to experience said creepy ass paranormal shit.
Yes,
That's
and also, if you find a really good deal on a house, there is a direct correlation with how cheap it is and how haunted it is, apparently.
yeah, I think that's a good takeaway that we could we could get from I wonder if Zillow has that on their website. Just be like,
how many people have been murdered in my basement?
right, like they should have like a very specific kind of like Carfax report for a house where it's like how many people have died and how have they died and what is the likelihood that it is haunted.
That's the kind of house hunters show I want, where
Right.
it's like, it's like I love the memes where it's like, I raise raccoons and my wife teaches English as a second language to baboons. Our budget is $14 million. Like, I love those fucking memes, but really, I want the House Hunters episode where it's like, we're goth and we're looking for a house where at least 4 people have been ritually murdered. Like,
I mean, that's ultra specific.
well,
I'm,
when you're goth, you do things in a specific way, David.
yeah, I mean, niche is king, I suppose. I mean, that's how our industry goes, the podcast industry. Uh, you know, so what are you gonna do? But yeah, like I said, Tiffany, thanks so much for writing in. And once again, if you would like to check out the other listener write-in stories and the 2 other bonus episodes that will be released, the one-on-one conversations that I had, all it takes is $1 single. That's like less of a than the price of an iced coffee, or a shitty cup of coffee from Dunkin' Donuts. Doesn't even cost that
That'll be
much.
the last donkeys slander on this podcast, sir.
I'm just joking. That was actually I don't know. I could have used like some other shitty like what's a shitty coffee out there that like people pay money for? Do you know off the top of your head? Like I know some
Gas
people.
station coffee, basically.
Sure, yeah. Like I know snobs will turn their nose up at like Pike Place from good old Starbucks. Like they're like Pike Place, it tastes like burnt dog shit, and I'm like, well, that's a little excessive.
Also,
Uh,
how do you know?
I, I'm guessing, dog poop on a sidewalk, hot summer day. I don't know. But either way, yes. The point that we're trying to make is that it doesn't cost that much to get this extra content, and we hope that you spring for it because we definitely want to share it with as many people as possible. um Ted, you want to do shit that doesn't suck?
Yes, I do.
Cool. Would you like me to go first? I can go first.
Yeah, if you want.
Sure. So last night, I mean, this whole month, basically, I've talked about it several times already that I've been just binge watching horror movies. That's about it. Like I'll watch a horror movie, and if one is particularly fucked up, and I think I'm gonna have a hard time going to sleep, I'll watch The Office afterwards. That's about how this month has been going. And last night I watched probably one of the most fun horror movies I've ever seen in my entire life, and that is Ready or Not. Ted, have you seen this by chance? I can't remember.
No, I have not.
Okay, but you know of the movie I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
So, yeah, this movie came out last year, and it was kind of one of those where I was like, yeah, that'd probably be a good like DVD movie. But honestly, I kind of wish I went to go see it in theaters because it was a lot of fun. Like it was I'm not going to say it was unpredictable, but it had some fun twists and turns. It's basically like a deadly game of hide and go seek. That's chalk it up to that. And it was just a great mixture of a bunch of different horror subgenres, all encapsulated in like this black humor or dark humor within horror. It was good. Definitely recommend. So yeah, check that out. It's if you have HBO Max or whatever that other HBO streaming stuff is available, it's on HBO right now to stream.
Right on. I heard a lot of mixed things about that.
Yeah.
Um, but I think like a lot of that type of movie, if you're not a fan of horror to begin with, you're probably not going to care. So you're just going to see the bad parts of it, and not necessarily, appreciate it as a movie.
Yeah, and even if you are a fan of horror, like it's not. I mean, we've talked about this plenty of times before. The horror genre is so incredibly diverse. So what is right up someone's alley for horror is the exact opposite for someone else. So, but I liked it.
Right on. I'm going to go in a different direction, as usual.
Okay.
Um, I recently, every now and then, I'll just get like weird urges to watch movies from a specific director or from a specific series. Like a while ago, I was like, I want to watch all the Godzilla movies, and
Right.
I was looking for a movie to watch the other night, and I was just like, I'm gonna watch all of Akira Kurosawa's stuff, or at least all of it that I have, which is quite the undertaking because he made a lot of fucking movies.
Right.
um, but man, just I can't say anything about him or his work that hasn't been said by a million other people, and most of them better than what I'm going to say. But the word master or genius gets thrown around a lot. But those accolades are so fitting for him. Just banger film after banger film after banger film.
Hmm.
I plan on starting Seven Samurai tonight. I probably won't finish it because it's like 3.5 hours long, and I have to sleep at some point because I got to work in the morning. But um, just like maybe the best movie ever. It's up there, and you can say that about like 4 or 5 of his films. You know, off the top of my head. So
Hmm.
I've just been getting into that. I watched Rashomon the other night, and that one holds up. You know, Dreams is I think is misunderstood, but that's a great one as well. And just so many, and he's remembered mostly for his Chunbara or samurai films, and obviously those are all fucking phenomenal. But he had a lot of other films as well that are also good. So just Akira Kurosawa in general is my
Right
shit. It
on.
doesn't suck.
Yeah. I I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that I don't think I've seen any of his movies. And you can chastise me if you want because I definitely deserve it. But I definitely know he's held in high regard. Ted, did you watch the said movies on with your Criterion subscription? Is that
Yeah,
how you
so a
watched it?
lot of his films are on the Criterion channel
Hmm.
streaming service, which is like $10 a month and has so many classic and foreign and underappreciated films on it. I've got a few of them on DVD or Blu-ray, so that helped out some. Um, but yeah, a lot of his films are streaming on the Criterion channel, which is a pretty easy way to excuse me to watch a few of them
Hmm.
for a small price. Or I mean, they're available on several different streaming services, and you can probably get them from your local library as well.
Right on. Cool. Um, all right. Well, yeah, I think that's going to do it for this episode. Um, Ted, thank you so much as always for joining me and being a series regular on this podcast.
Indeed, sir.
Yes. And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you made it this far, like usual, I'm sorry and thank you so much for your for your listenership. We greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to check the social medias, and there'll probably be some info in the podcast description as far as signing up and donating to our Patreon, so you can get that extra content. So definitely be on the lookout for that if you're interested. But yeah. Like usual, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast already, please do. Leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We would greatly appreciate it. Helps us with getting discovered by people trying to look for new podcasts. Either 1 or 5 stars, nothing in between, none of this middle of the road shit, as Ted likes to say.
That's right, you make a fucking decision and you stick by it, goddammit.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're gonna give us a 1 star and a subsequent review, you better make it creative, or else I will, as always, I'll come take a shit on your front porch.
That's right.
Yeah. Do all that fun shit. Go check out our Etsy page. There'll be a link for that below as well. I think that's it. And as always, be kind, stay geeky, and eat lots of cheesecake. Bye!